As a moderator, I'm not going to talk about me, but I do want to start with a story that I've said many times in my career, but it's always very appropriate and everyone really likes it. So for those of you who have heard it already, I apologize, but there's a lot of new faces here. So the characters have changed as well. So for the sake of argument, I'm going to start with President Obama and Michelle. And so they were going to an event, and they were in the presidential limo going to an event, and the driver tells them, "I'm sorry, Mr. President, we need to stop for gas." And the president says, "By all means, go ahead and stop at the gas station." They get to the gas station, and the guy who's pumping gas, Michelle looks at him, and she tells the president, "He looks awfully familiar to me." And the president says, "Really?" She says, "Yes, as a matter of fact, yes, I know him. I dated him in high school." And the president looks at Michelle and says, "Well, aren't you glad you married me, the president of the United States?" And she says, "If I would have married him, he would have been the president of the United States." So my point is that women have all the power. Sorry, guys. But and success is measured in so many different ways, and it's defined in so many different ways. If you ask 10 people what is success, and they will have 10 variations of what success is to them. When I started at NBC 22 years ago, I was being groomed to be the next Katie Couric. Katie Couric was the anchor of the Today Show with Brian Gumbel, and I was on the Weekend Today Show, and they were grooming me. They had told me, when Katie leaves the Today Show, we want you to take the helm. And after 3 years of commuting back and forth, and it's funny because Alex mentioned about her list of non-negotiables, and I had a daughter at the time already, and I was 25 hosting the Weekend Today Show, and I thought, no, I want to raise my daughter in Miami with my husband and my family. And if I can do what I love to do, where I love to do it on my terms, then that's what I will do. And that's how I defined success at the time. And as Alex mentioned, many people would think that was a missed opportunity for me, but I think I've been extremely successful. As a result, I have 4 kids now, and I'm still married after 28 years. And I'm working at NBC, but in Miami, in the community that I love, and I can give back to it every day. So that's my meaning for success and my definition for success. But I think, needless to say, these women here, we can all agree that they're extremely successful in their own right. They don't have to be behind a man, they are in front of the man. Success many times is in front of the camera like me, or behind the camera, in front of the scenes, or behind the scenes. But we can be successful in so many different ways. I was going to introduce you all, but you have already been introduced. And I am just in awe of you. I feel under-accomplished when I read your bios, really. So kudos to you and congratulations. And we're going to start, Betty, if you will, just tell us a little bit about how you got into your business and kind of your trajectory.
Sure. I got into banking by chance. It was not necessarily what I thought I'd end up doing, but is actually what I am passionate about doing. I started actually, let me go back. I was born in Havana. I was the first child of a Spanish father and a Cuban mother. Came to the United States at the age of 3, a very conservative family, very strict father, father who was probably the first sort of promoter of equal gender opportunity, because he raised my younger brother and I the same way, very much to be independent, to get a great education, to be driven, to ask questions, to never accept things just on the surface, but always to deep dive. And I remember that at home during the dinner table conversations, he would choose it. We were not allowed to choose conversations. He would choose a topic the night before. We had to research, and then that's what we had to do the day after. And of course, I was always a little bit more of a good girl, being the daughter of the firstborn. My poor brother could not care less what those topics were, so I always had to give him bullet points so my father wouldn't get upset with him. And I guess I was always expected to be a doctor. That was sort of what, my father thought was the right thing given my skill sets. I was good at math. And so when I went to university, because again, like Alex, I was convinced I had to stay in Miami. I could not go away to school even though I wanted to. So I did my undergraduate in psychology and in chemistry, and I was with a friend who was in medical school already, and he was doing the graveyard shift at Jackson Memorial Hospital. And so he says, "Why don't you come? That way you get a sense as to what, awaits you." And when I went, I literally had an existentialist crisis, because I realized that when I saw blood, I fainted, and how could I go to medical school? How could I be a doctor? What kind of doctor would I be if I fainted every time I saw blood? So I went through a crisis. It was, I guess, my first challenge. Oh my God, what do I do? My whole life I was thinking, I'm going to be a doctor. I am going to do this because this is what, my parents think is the right thing for me. And I took some time off. I had an aunt and uncle who lived in Venezuela. And so I went there and spent time because, heaven forbid, I was not allowed to travel by myself anywhere where there wasn't family. So my aunt and I traveled around to Latin America, and I fell in love with the continent. It brought me back to my roots, being Cuban and not having had a home to go to. I realized Latin America, that greater Latin culture, was my home. And so I realized, check number one, I need to do something that includes Latin America, that includes the language skills that I've been blessed to have, because at home we always grew up speaking Spanish, English, and French. My father always made sure we did, because he spoke 7 languages and he thought 3 was too little. So I knew I wanted that, and it turned out my uncle was in banking. And he actually was running the operations of the Chase Manhattan Bank there in Venezuela at the time. And I got to see what he was doing, and I thought it was pretty exciting how he was involved in so many different aspects of society and of culture and of change and of economic development in the country. And so I decided to come back to Miami and get an MBA. So I went through a summer program at the university, got an MBA, and then I went to my parents and I said, you know, I love you both very much. I've always done what you've wanted me to do, but now it's time for me. And so the next big challenge I had to deal with was how to go to my parents and say, I'm going to New York. I'm not staying here in Miami because I feel that's where I need to be to start my career. So they didn't agree. I had to sell my car to have the money to go to New York because they wouldn't pay me anything. So I spent probably half of my savings to buy a winter coat because obviously living in Miami I didn't have one. And I just started my career there because I felt that was the right thing for me to do against the odds. And so I interviewed. I got a job as a credit analyst. I started my career there. And it was really more on the project financing corporate side for Latin America. I was working with Manufacturers Hanover as a credit analyst in their leasing company at the time. That was the early 80s, and financial markets in Latin America collapsed, starting with Mexico, and I spent a lot of time sort of restructuring and babysitting dead loans, and I thought, all right, I'm in my early 20s, I really don't want to babysit dinosaurs for the rest of my life. This isn't the way to promote my career or what I'm really curious or intellectually focused on. And through a very good friend, who now is my husband, he said, you should meet this lady called Marilena Lago Mastino, who works for the Chase Manhattan Bank, and she's really starting their private wealth. I said, private wealth? I said, what is that? I don't know what that is. I'm in corporate finance. Private wealth is not for me. And then again, I met this woman who actually became a friend and a mentor, and she actually did become my boss. And I just saw the passion in what she did. I saw the fact that no 2 days were the same, that in corporate finance, you were dealing with individuals that didn't make the decisions. But in private wealth, you were actually dealing with the owners of the businesses, the guys that controlled the money. And I found that very exciting because I was dealing with decision makers. And I am the type of person that liked to see results very quickly and like to see which channels to take in order to see whether I'm going in the right direction or not. And so that's how I got into banking, and that's how I got into private wealth. And I married in New York, and then we got the travel bug, and I said, you know, my husband was in private wealth, I was in private wealth. Switzerland seems like a great place to really, really solidify our private banking and private wealth management skills because that's where it started. And so I convinced him to move to Switzerland, and we did, and it was going to be a 3 to 5 year assignment, and it ended up being 28 years of our lives. And stayed in banking. For me, I guess my checkpoints and my non-negotiables were I needed to work for a firm that understood the role that women play in this business and how important it is for women to be in certain roles. And in Switzerland, it wasn't necessarily always very easy because Switzerland was not as advanced as the United States was at the time I left, and we were not very advanced in the United States either. I remember my very first meeting with what was my boss in my first job in Switzerland with the Chase Manhattan Bank. I was wearing the uniform at the time that we all wore back there in the 80s, dark suits, button-down white shirts, and a bow tie, because you really didn't wear anything else, right? You didn't wear nail polish, you didn't wear lipstick, heaven forbid you never wore a red dress or anything remotely with color. And I remember him looking at me, and he looked at my bow tie, and he says, why do you wear that thing? And I said, what thing? And he goes, this. He says, you look like a stewardess. We don't do those things in Switzerland. So the cultural aspects then became more known. But I guess for me, career in banking was always Latin America, because that was my passion, It was always travel, because that was also always my passion, because I agree with Alex that I think through traveling and through understanding other people and other cultures, you really understand a lot more about yourself and about what you are and what you believe in, and you develop even stronger commitments to what you really are. And it also allows you to be much more flexible and open-minded. I did many things in my career in banking. I guess, somebody mentioned that I don't think a career is ever linear. It really is a zigzag, and you have to seize opportunities, and sometimes opportunities come to you, and sometimes you have to make them. And so when I convinced my husband to move to Switzerland, it was his firm that moved us. And when we moved, of course, I was in private wealth. I was managing the Southern Cone at the time, but his firm did not think that I should be in Latin America, because my husband had a position there. And so I took a position in portfolio management. I knew nothing about portfolio management, but I learned very quickly. And a year later, I was managing a European equity fund, and that definitely got me out of my comfort zone. But what was important was to be able to be given the challenge to do that. And I thought, well, if my boss feels I can do that, I certainly can think I can do this too. And networking, studying hard, being better prepared than anyone else, and really making sure you focused on the right things, that for me was very important as I was going through that role. And then after I did that for a few years, there was an opportunity to be the liaison between our private wealth and investment banking operations for Europe. And I thought, gee, that sounds interesting. I think I could do that. And so I asked for the job. Again, I didn't think I was 100% prepared to do it, but why not? And so I did do that. That was the only time it actually took me away from being involved with Latin America, because it ended up being more sort of Europe, Middle East, and India. And that presented to me a totally different opportunity, and definitely got me out of my comfort zone, because I had to travel to Pakistan, I had to travel to Abu Dhabi, I had to travel to India and deal with a very, very macho culture and a very sort of Latin American culture that I was so used to before. And so it was, how do you conduct a meeting with someone in Pakistan where you're the only woman there and there has never been a woman there? And so that presented challenges as well. The next step of my career after that, I was called by the Edmond Safra Group, because they had just opened up their operations in Switzerland after a hiatus. They called to see whether I wanted to create for them a private wealth business from scratch. And I thought, gosh, sure is a change from traveling to Pakistan and traveling to Abu Dhabi and India and going back to Latin America. So that I really enjoyed, and I wanted that. I never created a business from nothing, but I thought, well, I know what private wealth is about. I know the marketplace. I know the sources of wealth. I know clients, and I enjoy this business. Why not? So again, out of my comfort zone and into something totally different. I joined the Safra Group in 1991. I created their Latin American private wealth business. HSBC bought us out in 1999, and when they did, Latin America was the largest of all of the regions that we had. We opened up offices throughout Latin America. We hired, we built up. And then when HSBC bought us out and I stayed with them, I ended up running their private wealth business for Switzerland and for Latin America and then globally. So I spent a lot of time on the road. But I think for me, what I really enjoyed about that company was the fact that it allowed me the flexibility to also be a mother. I had my children late in my career. I had my daughter at 36 and my son at 40. I think for me it worked because I had the children at the time where my career was already advanced enough, where I really knew I wanted to come back, but I also really knew that I could ask for what I wanted. And I think one of the advice that I give all of you, it doesn't matter when you want to be a mother, when you really want to make that transformative decision in your life, do not be afraid to know that you can come back and that you can ask for flexibility. Especially in today's world, companies need women that are really, really talented, and companies are more and more willing to give that flexibility. And it is so important for you because an extra 5 hours at home with your children can be 50% more than what you spend with them during the week. So I asked for flexibility. I worked 80%, and I worked 80% throughout my children's let's say early school years and high school. And I think that for me was absolutely invaluable because it allowed me to go to the tennis games. It allowed me to go to the soccer games. It really allowed me to participate in their lives. And as Alex said, maybe it wasn't as important for my kids, but it was certainly important for me. Very comfortable at HSBC, and I'm not good at being comfortable. I think one other advice is don't ever be comfortable staying comfortable, because you're not sharp when you're comfortable. You have to always be out of your comfort zone. And so I was starting to be in my comfort zone at HSBC doing what I was doing, and I wasn't comfortable. And again, as fate has it, I get a knock on the door saying Goldman Sachs is looking for someone to run their Latin American private wealth business. Would you be interested? And it was going to be taking me out of Switzerland and into the United States, and that was one of my non-negotiables while my children were at school. I wanted them to stay in Switzerland. I wanted them to get an education in Switzerland afterwards, university, wherever they wanted. And so I managed to negotiate with Goldman Sachs that I would stay in Switzerland until it was the right move for us to come to the United States. So I moved over, and I had all of these plans to, build up Latin America, but I moved over in 2008, and then the financial crisis hit, and so then you have to be flexible, and you have to deal with change, and so they said to me, well, you are going to build Latin America, we'll give you that, but we really want you to run the Swiss bank now, too. So I was holding two jobs. I was running the Swiss bank for Goldman Sachs for 2 years, commuting between Geneva and Zurich just about every day. And then I was also traveling to Brazil because we were trying to build a business there. And I was always traveling to New York because I had to convince people of what we needed to do. And so it really stretched my bandwidth. But throughout that, I think what really kept me going was knowing that I had fantastic support at home. I always believe that every woman should have a great wife at home. But since we don't have wives at home, I was very lucky to have a nanny who was really part of the family. Being in Switzerland, I didn't have my mother or that family to support me, but I did have her, and my children see her as a second mother. And I also had a very understanding husband who not necessarily always was happy about my travel schedule and what I was doing, but certainly was always supportive. So you need buy-in, you need support, you need organization at home, or else you're not going to be able to do what you do. And so after this about 2.5-year process of running the Swiss bank and running Latin America, I finally convinced them that they needed somebody else to run the Swiss bank, that I really needed to dedicate myself to Latin America. And I've been doing that ever since. And a year ago, my daughter had already been at university, my son in a boarding school in Litchfield, Connecticut. I really didn't have an excuse to stay in Switzerland anymore. And so now I am back here in Miami after being away for over 30 years and enjoying every minute of it. It's a fantastic city. It's a very dynamic city. And this is what I missed in Switzerland, this community of really women networking with women wanting to reach out and to promote women and to have a culture of more women, I think is what I really missed in Switzerland. This is what I really love here. So if I had any advice to really just finish sort of your question, I would say follow your passions. Not necessarily will you always know where you're going to end up, but when you do realize what you love, really follow it through and seize opportunities, never stay in your comfort zone, and really work with people that will always add value to you, and make sure you always add value to those that you have around you as well. And don't be afraid to ask, and don't be afraid to self-advocate. We tend to not ask, and for those reasons not really appreciate our true political capital. We as women underestimate our political capital, and we really need to not do that.
Thank you. What a great story, wasn't that? Unbelievable. I have just a couple of questions before we're going to move to Catherine, because Catherine has to go to a board meeting, I believe, and since we all want more women on boards, she needs to leave at 10:30. But before that, Betty, first of all, is your family all here now?
My daughter is right here.
Okay.
She actually works for the Counsel, and I think I was more nervous about speaking in front of her than about speaking in front of anybody else. And so my family is all here now.
Okay, that's good. And you touched upon the fact that you encountered many cultural differences in Pakistan and Abu Dhabi, and I believe even in Latin America, a very machista society. How did you deal with that as a woman in a leadership role? Because I'm sure you received a lot of resistance from men. How did you deal with that? How did you circumvent that and to continue growing?
I think it's interesting. I think I don't underestimate men at all, because I think, well, some of my greatest mentors have been men, and I've had the real luck to really have the connections and to have relationships with some fantastic men who have taught me a lot. I never found I never found resistance from Latin American men. I thought I would when I was starting my career, but I think they, especially, maybe I was very lucky, but I think if you come prepared, if you come sure of yourself, and if you are if you don't try to be a man, I think they respect you a lot more. I think it is such a shame when we as women feel we have to act like men, or dress like men, or talk like men for men to respect us. We need to be ourselves, because ourselves are pretty damn good. And we need to be true to what we are. We always need to be professional. We always need to make sure that if the conversation veers to something that isn't professional, we absolutely bring it back, because we're there to do business and they need to know that that's the way it is. But I think we should not be afraid to be feminine whatsoever. I think they respect that, but you have to be prepared. And I think our reality is we need to be more prepared than the men are, because they're going to judge us much more harshly and they're going to test us much more often. And once we are judged and we pass the test, then I do believe that they will be absolutely loyal and absolutely, faithful to the fact that they trust you. So I've never envisioned any problems there in Latin America. In the Middle East, it's different, because it's much more of a it's a deeper cultural issue. I found it, to be honest, very difficult. But again, I think it's the same things. You need to be professional, you need to be well prepared, you need to keep it to business, and you need to make sure that they know that you are committed to basically keeping it that way.
A lot of these young women will encounter some of those sexist men, so that's great advice in order to make it in what many call a man's world, but we don't call that anymore here. It has changed, but we've come a long way. We still have a long ways to go. So, Catherine, I'm gonna turn you have your own mic over there, if you can grab that mic. Because, we've all heard of the triple threat, and in Catherine's case, it's the quadruple threat, right? Senior Vice President, Chief Administrative Officer, General Counsel, and Secretary of Brightstar. That's unbelievable. So tell us a little bit about how you got to that point of being the quadruple threat.
I'm still trying to figure it out. Well, I was recruited to become for the General Counsel position to take the company public. As part of that, generally the secretary role accompanies that position. So those two came in as an entree into the company. And then over time, as you build relationships, as you become the trusted advisor, people begin to see you more broadly. They see your capabilities and how they can rely on them. And when you move in a fast-paced environment where you need to be able to think out loud when you're the CEO, you tend to rely upon people in their broader, in a broader context. And so that's what happened here. The CEO felt that I had an ability to be an advisor as it relates to HR, and so that's how I got the Chief Administrative Officer. I am not an HR professional. I admitted that from the beginning, but I am an employee. I do have relationships. I do understand what would make me happy as an employee, how I would like to be communicated with, how I would like to be treated from a benefits perspective. And when you do that, you use the professionals that are on your team who are quite seasoned and quite capable to help you put it in the right context. And that's really how it happened.
And how did you get started? Did you always know that this was the business you wanted to go into? It
was law or medicine. My experience was different. I got to physics, and the grades weren't as well as I wanted them to be. So I quickly diverted to something I thought I could do much better. And even though I dibbled and dabbled in it a little bit with my children, my mother helps me in that regard. But that's really how I got to law.
I was reading your bio, and one thing that really impressed me is your priorities. You always said that your priorities is your family. And we always talk about balancing your personal life and your professional life, and especially for us women who happen to be mothers as well, it's extremely difficult. And you've done a beautiful job in doing that. Can you tell some of these women here how you've been able to balance that?
So I was born with a gift, and the gift is I have a broad bandwidth and I don't require a lot of sleep. So that's generally unfair, particularly in Miami. Sleep seems to be very important to people. So I'm up 4 hours before most of everybody else, so it's easy for me to kind of get ahead in that respect. I also married a military man, so he's up even earlier. So that was is a gift that we have. So 5 o'clock in the morning, I'm up, I'm ready, I'm way ahead of everybody else. We were joking with Patty. She sent me a text, I'm going to bed at 5, and I was getting up. So we weren't able to have breakfast, but nonetheless, I guess with that as a backdrop, if you set your priorities first, and you always, as everybody's articulated, said you have non-negotiables. When my children were born, I didn't travel anywhere that I couldn't get in and out more than 2 days, and I had responsibility for the globe. China was the exception. You just can't do it. But I brought the breast pump. I brought everything to keep myself going. And you stick to the rules. And if you do that, you're able to really spend the time with your family. You make it to the meetings. You do everything that you need to do. And it works. Obviously, if you have a spouse that's as collaborative as mine is, it makes it even easier. And you really teach your children about what you do. Why is it important? I'm no better than anybody else. I'm no different than a woman that may stay home. It's just we all do what we've been given as a gift, and we focus on that. It's just choices, really, and acknowledging where your gifts lie, and you communicate.
What are some of the obstacles that you face? Because I know that when I got to New York City, which is obviously one of the most diverse cities in the world, 22 years ago, and I discovered that they weren't ready for a Hispanic anchor. They had always encountered the Northeastern anchor for all of these network shows, and all of a sudden this Cuban American from Miami shows up that happens to be fairly good looking, but also intelligent. What a concept. And so it was difficult. It was difficult to get the respect from the New Yorkers, who even the press called me a debutante. So my question to you is, I'm a Hispanic American woman. As an African American woman, what were some of the obstacles that you faced in your trajectory?
So I'm the reverse of you. I grew up in New York. And so when I get
to tell the accent,
it's not even strong anymore. So when I get to Miami, so that's another cultural shift, which I won't have to explain to any of you in here, though the exception is I understand and speak Spanish, so I have a cheat sheet that most people don't have. Really, when I think about it, it all goes to kind of your upbringing, what your parents teach you. So I grew up in a predominantly Jewish neighborhood, 85% Jewish. So out of the womb, I already was outnumbered. So you learn Yiddish growing up, you learn how to speak Hebrew. You don't know anything different as a kid until someone points it out to you. So knowing that I can make it there, so when you get to college and you're a New Yorker and you're a black woman and they only had allowed women probably 10 years before you got there, every single room had double and triple black people in them. The whites had their rooms separate. You begin to learn that life is full of challenges. And what separates you from anybody else is not the color of your skin. It's not that you're a male or you're a female. It's your ability to tackle the lion that tries to face you and not be afraid of it, because they're more afraid of you than you really are of them. That's why everything is set up that way. And once you figure out that that's the way the system is set up, then they don't have anything over you. So when you go to law firms and one is more Anglo-Saxon and they say, but isn't that a Jewish firm that you're going to? I say, you all look the same to me, and by the way, most of my friends are Jewish. Then they figure, okay, that didn't work. And so when you get to the Jewish firm and when you have your wedding and you have it at a night so that the people who are Orthodox can participate and you have kosher food, they figure that didn't work. So then when you go, it's in-house and there are no black people at all, you're the only one. And they say for a black person, you're pretty smart. You figure, okay, if you can get through that one, and then you get to a broader company and they allow you to move and achieve, you figure by the time you get to Brightstar in a town where, again, you're at the 85% number again, you're the only black senior female in the company, or female in the company. By then you kind of have an approach to a market and an approach to the company, and I was very fortunate that the CEO of the company, it was all about achievement. It really wasn't about who you are, what you look like, and what you do. It was whether you can operate within the company, and so it was a perfect match. from that perspective.
What would you say was the most important piece of advice that you received in your career?
Good question. It probably was from my father, who went to Harvard as the first black man that, so when you have parents like that, they tell you, don't look at the statistics, just look at your capabilities. Keep your head down and forge forward, and you will survive. And that's really, really what did it. My mother grew up in the segregated South. Her parents taught her, you don't eat in any public place. You come home, we have food, we can do it. So they train you to understand how you can survive and how you can do it in a very poised way. And then it's a generational communication. My daughter, my son, same thing. They're not afraid of anything. So from that perspective, that's how it works. And you just communicate to other people.
And you're in this community. I also read that you give back. You give back to the community. I think when you look at a lot of the successful women, in reality, people, but we're here in amongst women for the most part, a big part of our success is the fact that we give back to the community. We understand how important that is, and we become mentors as well, and to help other women as well along the way. So tell us a little bit about how you feel about that.
How to give back. Well, there are multiple ways how to give back, and I'm sure I don't have to teach anybody in the room how to do that. I think many of the prior speakers have talked about, particularly in the Cuban community, I think family is very important. It's no different in the black community. It's no different in the corporate community. You find your passions, whether they're your children's school, whether it's about your church, which is very big for me and my husband. We tend to give particularly to missions in many countries, in Latin America in particular, and other places, in Haiti and others, where we're all born on equal footing the moment we come out. Is what happens in moment number 2 that can define our life. And if we can make sure there's food on the table for children around the world, if we can make sure there's an educational path for children along the way, if we can make sure that medicine is available, then they have an equal opportunity to the children that are born in America, that are born in Brazil, that are born in Cuba, et cetera, because that really is what differs. They don't have to be about the parent. They just have to have a parental influence to let people know that they care about them, that we all have God-given talents, and but for the grace of God, that could have been me. I just happened to have been born in Great Neck, New York, but I could have been born someplace else. And if I can provide those opportunities to other children, then my life was worthwhile. And that's my mission.
Okay, we're going to have a couple of questions because I know that Catherine has to leave, and I'm sure some of you have some good questions for her. You are amazing, and I think that you have your priorities right, and I think we can all attest to the fact that when a woman is successful, we can look up to her, and we could tell our children, that's how you do it. So, Catherine, thank you so much for that story. What questions do we have for Catherine? Come on, a lot of young people here. You've got to have a couple of questions at least. Anything? There we go.
Catherine, you talk a lot about knowing what you're passionate about and how the advice, the best career advice that your father gave you about knowing what you're capable of. How did you hone in on your capabilities?
You mean to be a lawyer, or just?
That's a really good question.
So that what comes to mind and what maybe differs in how as parents or influencers we need to think about it. There are two choices. My parents always taught us you will go to school, not if you go to school. And it wasn't about money, it was about a focus. In many communities and in many families, that's not top priority, it's other things. We didn't have a choice whether we were going to school. We didn't have a choice what the caliber of schools you will go to. My father would have worked 7 jobs to make sure we got to the schools that are capability. So again, it's not about money, it's about sacrifice, quite honestly, for us to determine where we were going to go. When I thought about taking the job here in Miami, the first thing I looked at is what were the schools that were available, where I was going to send my children, determined where I was going to live, regardless of whether I liked the home, whether I thought the people were going to be nice. It was all about my children so that they can flourish. So how I honed on it is they gave me a diversity of opportunity through education and sacrifice to be able to send me to the right schools. That's where my mother chose where we were going to live, so that we would have access to technology, access to diversity of thought, so that we could flourish in that particular environment. Was it easy? No, because we looked differently than everybody else. But that was what home was for. Don't worry about it. You can do it. I'll join the PTA. I'll have your back. And that's really how it happened. And then law just, I don't know, I just enjoyed it. I liked crime shows. I still do, by the way. It drives my husband nuts. And that was really it. My mother was a nurse, so it was doctor or lawyer. It wasn't a sophisticated choice.
Love it. Any more questions for Catherine?
Just a quick question. There's a book that I'm reading right now that your entire presentation resonates with, and it's called The Power of Habits. And it actually zones in on yes, I totally take the notes because it's a great book. And so I have a very simple question for you. What is the one habit that you have had throughout your career that you can say has been that winning habit, whether it's before you're going up for a meeting or how you make your presentations? What is that one habit that you would say is what has won for you?
That's a tough one. The first word that came to my mind was disciplined. The flip side of same word is I'm a perfectionist, which means I fail a lot because no one's perfect, but I strive to understand what perfect looks like and try to shoot for it. I skate to where the puck is going in the sense of perfection and discipline. My family doesn't like it all the time, but that to me is how you compete. I choose what I determine to be perfection. I don't read both print and digital media. I choose my method. Other people do other things. There's rules I have about it, but I'm disciplined about those rules.
Catherine, first of all, congratulations on the professional and the person that you are today.
Thank you.
I imagine that there's been dark moments in your career, and without going into the details of those, could you give us some idea of what got you through it and what propelled you to the next step?
Sure. Two things. My faith, which is pretty strong, and the second, I would say, is the answer to her first question. I'm very disciplined. I always go back to the plan. What did we commit? What did you say you were going to do? I reread my notes to myself about you can do, you're empowered, you're anointed. I kind of have a cheat sheet of things that I start myself with every day. Don't look at their faces, and not here. Just in in board meetings, you have to be disciplined about things. I remember I had a coaching session. We're now owned by the Japanese, and things are different, culturally different than being owned by a 6'5" Latin, gregarious Latin. And so you try to learn, and I remember one of her inputs was, women aren't to be noticed, they're just to be heard in meetings. Find yourself a pantsuit, get very conservative. I couldn't find one in Miami. That was the kind that they were talking about. So you did the black dress, the black sweater, the black pocketbook, the black shoes, everything you can possibly think of to not be noticed. But it's kind of hard. I realized I'm already noticeable just by what I look like, who I am. So I kind of knocked that one off the list. And so you really adapt that I got this far by just being me and being confident and having faith that the way God created me was the way I was going to be successful, not by what other people think, but by what He enamored me with. And therefore, that's what keeps me going, regardless of how tough it may be on any given day.
We have one more question before Catherine has to leave.
This is a question actually for the panel and even the previous speaker. There's a common theme from women that I'm hearing, that there is that strive to be perfection. You won't normally hear that from a man, from a colleague. So my comment, perhaps my observation is, could that be because since the day that we're born, we need to be a super person because we need to be the wife, the mother, the professional, and we have to somehow prove that we're better, we're the A+ student next to the A student to really get that credibility. So this is a challenge that I've seen, and I've heard this theme, already in just this morning about how we strive to be perfect. And maybe that's not necessarily the best route to take, is to be perfect. Maybe to be more comfortable with yourself. So it's a question for the girl.
Let me answer, and then I'll leave you. You defined perfection as being the top in that particular area. It's not always being the A, actually, perfection. Perfection is being the best that you can be, right? So let me be clear about that. That's not what I mean by perfection. It's to take the talents that I've been given and multiply them to the best way that I can. Taking advantage of whether it's mentoring, collaboration, to achieve what I've designed to achieve. There are other people who are 10 times smarter than me, who make more money than me, who had more children than I had, that probably live in better neighborhoods than I do. There's a whole long list of things that, depending on who you ask and what people value, they'll say that I have failed. But I know I haven't failed because my list isn't determined by others. My list is determined by I've taken every bit that I've been given and I've multiplied it by 100-fold. And to me, that's why I say I can be successful, and that wasn't getting always A's or anything, all of that. It's just I took what I was been given and I, watered it and bloomed in the way God caused me to bloom. And it may not be, a dozen roses to other people, but for me, that's why I sleep at night, is that I know I work hard to be all that I was created to be. That's perfection to me.
I think, once again, as I started the segment talking about success, and everybody has a different definition of what success is, and that has to come from within. What do you feel is success? And that's the only way you're going to be happy, if you fulfill your own definition of success. Catherine, thank you so much for being part of this panel. We're going to turn now to Liliana Gonzalez, Senior Regional Business Director, Aortic and Peripheral Disease Management, Medtronic. First of all, can you explain that to us?
Well, Medtronic is a medical device leader company, and we are divided by different business. So aortic peripheral vascular is precisely devices that we use to treat patients that have aneurysm in the aorta, in the thoracic, on the abdominal, and peripheral side is everything that is related with like stents, but especially for the members, legs, and the carotids. So that's, that's the name, but we do have the business unit names quite technical.
Now that we have that clear, talk about your career and how you got to the position where you are today.
Yeah, actually, I know we have, like half an hour, and I want to be really brief. I love being concise.
I think we have more like 15 minutes. But.
Okay. So I finished my university in Colombia, and I'm from Bogota. And I began to work with some companies, local companies, and then I decided to be an entrepreneur. I thought it was beautiful just to develop yourself. I am a very independent person, and I thank a lot, probably the, traditional that we have in Latin America, where, the man is the one who brings the bread, and you see the mother that, she's happy, but gosh, you love to be independent. So I was born in that concept of really being independent. And that's the entrepreneur story that really was very interesting for me. But I wasn't successful, so it was a very interesting situation in my life where I learned a lot. So success comes, but, unsuccess also is part of it. So then I went to do an MBA, and finally, when I finished my MBA, I have the opportunity to join 3 different sectors or industries, and one of them was medical devices. It was actually a distributor of Medtronic. And I was so inspired by the mission. I mean, just thinking about that, through my work, I could help, patients to save life, to me was like, wow. And I think that sense of purpose has really helped me a lot, and to kneel, to go the extra mile, to work hard, because at the end of the day, I think that the base and the foundation for anybody, whether it's a man or a woman, is performance. Is the way that you work, is the way that you are engaged, and it's much better when you are so much convinced about it. So, I joined the industry, and it's been really an interesting path for me. I had a lot of obstacles, but I also had amazing satisfactions. And the obstacles sometimes, the most typical one is to convince people about your ideas. People are very much used to the status quo. I love, to shift paradigms. And one of the biggest paradigms that I shifted in Latin America was, wow, we depend too much on distributors. We really want to enhance, to go to more patients. I truly believe that the best way is to do it direct. So I really work hard to convert distributors into direct sales. And I had a lot of obstacles, from different areas, but I had always had the support of people that believe in my ideas. And it took me 5 years to take one business from 0% of direct sales to 55% of direct sales. And I've been very proud of that, because, this is something that is not easy to do. But again, if you work hard, if you find the right tools, if you, I always think that you have to be very well prepared. It's something that I see that, sometimes men are very successful improvising. I don't think we as women are, nothing, that, we are best or worse. But I have found that any time that, and I'm not an expert in any topic, but if I have the chance to be asked to make a presentation or to go to a meeting, I really take the time to be prepared, because we have very few opportunities to be visible. Whenever we have that opportunity, just take it.
This question is for both of you, but I'm going to first ask it to Liliana. Do you think that we create our own opportunities, or are we given the opportunities?
I think both. I don't think there is one way or the other. I think that, again, the foundation, when we are asked about, well, what did you do to be successful? And I'm like, well, work hard in the first place. There's nothing is going to happen if you are not good at what you do. Then there are many things that we learned. We learned, how to make networking. We learn how to influence people, which is really very important. Probably at the first level of your career, you just need to show people that you are good, but then you need to convince and to create relationships. But that doesn't happen very easily. Normally, women are very shy. We just want to, go and have the job done. Well, guess what? Before that, somebody else was talking to the person that takes decision. So we have to learn. It's a little bit out of our comfort zone, but those are the things that I truly believe that as we move forward, we really need to integrate in our careers in a very meaningful way. So I just will add that I think that we own our development. There is not that my boss doesn't help me, or I don't get this opportunity in this company, or that women are not taken serious. It's us, the one who really make the change. It's not easy. You get a lot of frustrations. You have to be very patient. But is you the one who drive?
Do you agree with that, Betty? Because a lot of people say, well, they're waiting for the opportunity to arise, but many other people think you got to take the bull by the horns and you got to create your own opportunities.
I think both are important. I think opportunities are there, and it's up to us to be able to seize them. But I feel, maybe it's just my personality, I feel you need to create your own opportunities as well. You need to really know what you want and know the right timing for that. And then go out there and make sure that you're networking the right way, you're speaking to the right people, and you're communicating with your bosses, with management to say, I want this, I feel I can get this, or how can I go and get this? And this is where mentors come in so well, because if you have a mentor that really understands you, really cares about promoting your career path, they'll be able to help you as to how to create those opportunities for yourself.
Liliana, you talked about creating ideas, and how do you, when you know and you feel good about something and you're confident that it's going to work, how do you go and sell that and make people believe in that idea as well?
I think there is a combination of things. Intuition is very strong in us, and I think that's a very powerful tool that we need to learn how to use it. But the other piece is, any argument that you do, it will be great to have it based on facts. Because that makes a difference. That gives you credibility whenever you have the opportunity to participate in a project or to make in a meeting a presentation. I think that base facts really makes a big differentiation. And I would add also, I think that I know we have already mentioned through the whole morning the authenticity, being what you are. Don't be afraid of asking questions. My favorite question is why? I mean, we are so much in a world that this is the policy, this is the rule, this is the way it happens, and that's it. Well, guess what? Maybe it's not, or why? Or give me the rationale, because there are really different ways to see things. So I keep, asking questions and being very much what I am, true to myself. Though I also have learned to modulate myself, because normally I am very direct. And at the beginning, I did have a lot of issues because I was like, asking or saying, I don't agree with you. I was even asked sometimes, please, can you just for once not say what you think? And like, okay, so I need to be a little bit. So now I have learned and understand that maybe making a question or making a point is just saying, well, you have, you are right about this, but what about these things? So those are, the things that I have been integrating in my career that I really want to share with, with this group today.
What about self-promoting yourself? Because a lot of people don't like that, and sometimes we need to do that. So how do you differentiate between being a proud woman and knowing what you have and being confident, and then going borderline to the other way where people don't like that kind of personality, that trait that some people have, that they go overboard on the self-promoting?
Yeah, I think that's really hard for many of us, to talk about ourselves. I think and I would say that, when I was invited to this meeting, I was like, oh my gosh, but I am also very much aware that it's so important to share and to make yourself visible. So I cannot give any recipe, because there is not any recipe. I think that each one of us really understand what we have. I will highly recommend to be very knowledgeable about our strength. Every single one has, basic strength, and play on that strength. My life changed when I read the Strength Finder, and I was amazed, when I received a report about, if I was asked to spend a day to describe myself, I would never have come to something like that. So there are tools there. We do have to invest time to read, to analyze, and to be prepared, to serve ourselves. Don't feel bad about it. But again, foundation is for me, the foundation is the performance. Visibility is very important. The stretch assignments, we have the opportunity where we work to have stretch assignments, and I love it because that's the opportunity that opened, kind of my paradigm to different things and the way to think, and to have the opportunity to see, this project. Right now I am working in a Middle East and Africa project, which is amazing, and I went to Dubai and I learned so many things. So those kind of activities, raise your hand and really try to, learn, and that helps you to have visibility and promotion. Every single company, every single person is different. But my invitation here is like, again, we are the owners of our career path. Nobody will knock the door and, hey, do you need help? No, it's you. It's you the one who drive it.
Betty, is there a fine line between self-promotion and just going overboard?
Yes, there is. I mean, I find self-advocacy difficult personally. I've always felt that the numbers should speak for themselves, but they don't. And so that's something that I really need to work on as an individual, because you want to be in control of that soundbite. You want to be in control of that conversation and that dialogue. You don't want others to control it for you. So one of the things that I've tried to do, because it is so difficult for me, is I also try to find, I think there's a big difference between having mentors and having advocates within a firm. And so you need both. You need people that will mentor you, but you need people that are going to help you advocate for yourself and will advocate for you. And so that is one of the advices that I always give to colleagues and people that I mentor. Find yourself a good advocate, too, that will help you fill in the blanks that you can't fill in yourself, because there is that fine line.
You know, another important aspect of this is preparation, and I've heard this from all of you. And be prepared. Always be prepared in any situation that you're in, so that you're not taken by surprise. And I think that each of you has talked about that. You don't go into a meeting unprepared, and you're prepared for any question that they may ask you, and that brings in confidence as well. Don't you agree, Liliana?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that you know, the first years, especially when, you know, there was kind of one of the points is how do you differentiate you know, with your counterpart, male counterpart, and to be honest, I never think that we are best or they are best or anything. I think we are just complementary. But I have noticed that as you move forward, there are more men than women, and men love to challenge. I mean, they challenge every single thing. You know, even though they are 100% sure about, I mean, that you are 100% sure about what you're doing, they just want to show if you are confident on it. So preparation is amazingly important, really. I've seen very young female leaders, you know, that, you know, want to be leaders, that have all the talent. They are given an assignment or the opportunity to present, and unfortunately they don't do it well, and then it's hard to overcome that image. So always remember, there are few opportunities, and if you have to work harder, that's the price you have to pay for it, but it is really worth.
We only have a couple of minutes, but Betty, your take on that, on being prepared.
Oh, absolutely. I think that, to me, is one of the key ingredients of success. You have to be prepared, almost have to be over-prepared. And I think as women in a business and in the financial industry, where we still are not the majority, especially at certain levels, we tend to be very well represented at the bottom, but then as you go up, we're less and less represented. You have to be even more prepared, and being prepared, though, doesn't necessarily mean you should answer everything. If you don't know the answer to something, you say, I don't know, let me get back to you. Because it's worse to say something that is not correct than to admit that you don't know.
That's a good point. Okay, so we're going to open it up for questions. Yes.
Thanks. Okay, so I work in communications, and part of my role is inspiring employees, you know, driving our employee comms, keeping them engaged. And for me, part of that message is always there's something that you can do individually, personally, to stay engaged. So I'd love to hear from any of you up there on the stage, including you, Jackie. Was there ever a moment in your career where you found yourself disengaged, you were no longer in the game? And what did you do to get over that, you know, find your drive and, you know, motivate yourself, get back engaged?
Betty, Liliana, do you have? For me, I will tell you, going back from a network experience, coming back to a local experience, you know, when I was on the Today Show, I was interviewing presidents and from other countries and world leaders and our president. So it was a different perspective then to change that mentality and come here on a local level. And I felt a little, I don't want to say disengaged, but I felt, oh my God, I wasn't in this national spotlight and doing all these national interest stories, and now I have to kind of change my mentality to a more local aspect. And now instead of interviewing presidents, I interview the governor or the senator of Florida, or yesterday, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who I had on my show Impact. So it was kind of being flexible and changing. And but once I got into it, okay, wait a second, I could really make a difference in this community. On a national level, it's a little more difficult, but on a local level, you could really make a difference with what you do in my business. So I would just say, be flexible, be open to change. And if you feel a little disengaged, work on it, and be prepared, and know that you can make a difference. I think we as women, we can definitely make a difference, not only in our professions, but in our community. And it's important for us to do that.
I think in every career, like in every life, there are periods of ups and downs, and there are times where you you're going to feel disengaged because you've got something else that you're worried about, or you expected that a certain project or a certain role or a certain opportunity was going to be different than it was. For me, it was when I thought it would be a great idea, and I asked for that investment banking sort of liaison where I had to travel to Pakistan and India and the Middle East. And you know, after the exoticness of traveling to these countries faded away, and I had to deal with the reality of a culture that I didn't feel comfortable in, not because it was a culture that I disliked, it was just a culture where I didn't have any touch points. There was no history. And in this business, you needed history in that culture. I became a bit disengaged because I thought, oh my God, I'm not going to make an impact. And that for me was very difficult, not making an impact. And then I just stood back. I tried to understand the scenario, understand, well, how can I make an impact? And for me, the impact was really getting to know the women of some of the clients that I met, and how incredibly interesting and how fascinating they were, and how then for me it was almost, gee, I'm glad I'm doing this because I am meeting such fantastic women who have absolutely no opportunities to do what I do, but are probably much more intelligent, much more world-rounded, very, very well educated because they're all Oxford educated and they're sitting at home. What can I learn from them, and what can I maybe share with them? And that remotivated me and re-engaged me in what was a very, very difficult market for me to cover.
Lilian?
Just searching a sense of purpose. I do have to have, you know, a driver, a mission. They make, you know, making the difference. For me, it's a must. If I don't have that, I really prefer to leave.
I like that.
Yes.
Good morning. First of all, thank you for being here and speaking to us and sharing your time. I guess if you could think when you're in the midpoint of your career and you're trying to gain either a client base or sign those first big deals, and you were talking to your potential client and they're more than happy to reach out to you, ask questions. When the time came for them to sign, they wanted to talk to who they deemed the decision maker, which was the man you reported to. How did you deal with that?
Betty, you want to take that, or Liliana?
Betty, maybe you have better. Look, I think I come from a philosophy is, you know, if that's what's going to take to get the business, then that's what we've got to do. And as women in business, we have to develop thick skin, because if we don't have thick skin, we're going to be in for a very, very long evenings of no sleep. So as long as it was done with respect, that's just unfortunately the way the world is. So I wouldn't take it personally. I would definitely learn from that and say, all right, maybe how can I better position going into the opportunity so that individual or that client on the other side of the table sees me as a decision maker as well for the next time. But I certainly wouldn't take it personally. And as long as you got the deal, that's what counts. And if you need people to help you get it, it's not a reflection on you.
But can I add something that, you know, make sure that, you know, you talk to your boss and you say, next one, I am the one to handle it, and learn from the experience, and, you know, debrief with him, you know, why do you think happened, and so on, because those situations we have to accept. We do have to preserve our businesses, but we have to make sure that we raise our hands and say, well, next one is mine.
Okay, there was a question there.
Yeah. So two thoughts. As an employee, as a women leader, and also as on the other side, because I work in HR. So the first one is around the advocates, you said, and I've been reading a lot about the sponsors instead of mentors, or not instead, but combined to the two, how important it is, especially the significant impact it has in women. So along the career, having women that have gone through the same situations that you've had, help you, and having male sponsors also to accelerate your career is critical. But on the other side now, what I'm starting to see, especially in Latin America, is how family dynamics are changing, how family patterns are changing, and how male have also started to take decisions based on their personal lives and because they have children. So my thought as an organization, and I know this is the focus today is women, but from an organizational standpoint, I think that we need to be very open to how also those patterns are changing and make sure we open the space not only for women but also to others that are going through similar situations, and because the world is changing, and how can we open those forums and open those spaces besides women.
That's a very good point. I also think, and you talked about sponsors versus mentors and men versus women. Whoever believes in you, you have to surround yourself with positive people, and people that believe, not detractors, but people that are going to lift you and that are going to push you, positive people in your life. I think that's very important because, you know, there's a lot of naysayers out there, people that say you can't do it, you can't find yourself surrounded by these people. You have to try to surround yourself with very positive people. I know that in my instance, I had a very important mentor who was the vice president of NBC News in New York, Don Brown, who believed in me and who thought that I could do the job. And through thick and thin, when the press was criticizing me for having an accent, you know, I was born and raised in Miami, Florida, United States of America, and yet in New York, they believed I had an accent. And so, and that was just one of the many things that came up. And he always stood by me and believed in me and was confident in my ability. So I think that's very important. Surround yourself with very positive people that are going to push you forward. Any other questions? Because I think our segment is just about over. Yes? Yes.
So I think another recurring theme is kind of having advancements for women in the workforce as part of a culture change. So I wanted to, kind of having this event is kind of pushing the culture forward in Miami. What would be your advice as women leaders, and kind of being on this panel, you can advocate for this for sure, on how we here at this panel can take what we hear from you and learn here and kind of use it to have some kind of impact on culture change at our own micro levels, whether it be at our office or at our community? Or what would be your advice for kind of motivating people to help in this culture change so that we can get more women at the top?
Well, I think first of all by being a role model and by you setting an example. I think secondly is by you mentoring. You know, you can mentor people at every stage of your career. You don't need to start mentoring just when you're up at the top. And I think the other thing is to developing relationships with colleagues that are also male, so they are not threatened by the fact that you want to get to a certain place. So I think it's a combination of those three, and just making sure that, you know, if you're at a place where there is no women's network, for instance, create a women's network at your office, whether it's around a book that you're all reading, whether it's around a theme, but it is important to really be able to get that network and communicate and build a network internally and externally that you can talk about these things. Because I think everyone has different opinions depending on where they come and what their roles are and the industry or the sectors they're in. And so it's in the power of thoughts and in the power of dialogue where you're going to make change.
I will add I think it's also important the awareness of people around you. We have to keep in mind that at the end of the day, who takes decision is where the power is. So in the community or in the company, if you don't have a women network, talk to your boss, talk to the CEO, talk to the president, or whoever takes decision, just to make some awareness about the importance to have it. I think that it's a huge responsibility, the one that we have, and that we cannot make it by ourselves, but we need to sometimes to gather together and to make sure that people that again take the decisions will support and will be aware of the importance of it.
Liliana Gonzalez, Betty Sanchez, thank you so much. And thank you all for some great questions.